You wake up in the middle of a dream, and for a second, none of it makes sense. You were flying, or being chased by something you can't quite remember, or standing in your old school, except the hallways were wrong, and somehow that felt completely normal at the time. Then you're awake, and it's gone. Most of it, anyway. Maybe a few fragments hang around for a minute or two. A face, a feeling, a weird detail that doesn't fit anywhere. And then even those fade. You move on with your day like nothing weird just happened. But something weird did just happen for years. Hours, really, across your whole life. Your brain builds entire worlds while you're unconscious. Full scenes, characters who say things you never planned for them to say. Places that shift halfway through without you questioning it. Emotions that feel as real and intense as anything that happens when you're awake, sometimes more intense. And then it deletes almost all of it before you even get out of bed. Why would a brain do that? The easy answer is that dreams are just random noise. Leftover static from a brain that's still active while the rest of you is asleep. Nothing to it. Don't overthink it. But if dreams were truly meaningless noise, you'd expect them to look like noise. Messy, pointless, with no pattern at all. Different every single time with nothing connecting one dream to the next. Instead, dreams follow patterns so consistent that researchers have been able to map them across thousands of people from completely different backgrounds, ages, and cultures. Certain themes show up again and again: falling, being chased, losing teeth, showing up somewhere without being prepared. That kind of consistency doesn't look like static. It looks like a system doing something specific on purpose every single night. So the real question shifts. The interesting part isn't why dreams happen at all, it's what this specific nightly activity is actually doing for us, and why it survived millions of years of evolution instead of getting phased out. Evolution doesn't tend to keep expensive habits around for no reason, and dreaming is expensive. Your brain burns real energy running these simulations every night. One of the leading answers starts with something surprisingly practical: memory. While you sleep, your brain moves through different stages, and one of them, REM sleep, the stage most linked to vivid dreaming, lights up in brain scans almost like you're awake. Your eyes move rapidly behind closed lids, your brainwaves shift, and activity spikes in regions tied to vision, emotion, and memory. Sleep researchers, including Matthew Walker, have shown that this stage plays a real role in how your brain sorts memories. Some information gets filed away as important, some gets quietly deleted. Emotional experiences, in particular, seem to get processed and softened during this stage, almost like your brain is stripping the sharp edges off a memory before archiving it long term. Think about what that actually means. Your brain keeps working at night. It runs maintenance, sorting through everything that happened that day, deciding what matters enough to keep, and quietly editing your emotional responses to it before you wake up. The theory goes that dreaming might be a side effect of that sorting process. Your brain is pulling up memories, emotions, and random associations to file them away, comparing new experiences against old ones, looking for patterns, deciding what's worth keeping, and somewhere in that process, your conscious mind catches a glimpse of it, stitched into something that feels like a story, even though the underlying activity has nothing to do with storytelling at all. If that's true, every dream you've ever had might be a preview of your own brain doing invisible paperwork you were never supposed to see. Some sleep researchers have even tried testing this directly, having people learn a new skill, like a maze or a memory task, then tracking how well they perform after a full night's sleep versus after staying awake the same number of hours. Across a lot of these studies, the group that slept, especially the group that got a solid stretch of REM sleep, performs noticeably better. Whatever's happening during those dreaming stages, it isn't just background noise running alongside memory formation. It looks like it's actively part of the process. That's the memory layer. But there's a second layer, and it's a lot stranger. Some of the most common dreams, falling, being chased, showing up somewhere unprepared, losing teeth, aren't random at all. They're almost universal. People across completely different cultures, with no contact with each other and no shared media or language, report the same core dream patterns over and over. A researcher named businesszuco has a theory about this called threat simulation. The idea is that dreaming might work like a practice mode for danger. Your brain creates a low-stakes version of a threatening situation, getting chased, falling, being in danger, so that if something similar ever happens while you're awake, part of your brain has already practiced it and can react faster because the pathway already exists. It sounds strange, but it lines up with something researchers have noticed in kids. Children, who are more vulnerable and have less real-world experience handling danger, tend to have more nightmares involving being chased or attacked than adults do. Under this theory, that lines up perfectly. It looks a lot like training, a dress rehearsal for threats a young brain hasn't encountered yet in real life. It also might explain why people who've lived through genuinely dangerous or traumatic events sometimes report more frequent, more intense nightmares afterward, almost as if the brain is running the simulation on overdrive, trying to process a threat that already turned out to be real. So now there are two systems running at once. One sorting memories, one rehearsing danger. But there's a third piece to this, and it might be the strangest one. Dreams are also very often emotional, not just scary, sad, confusing, weirdly intense over things that don't matter at all when you're awake, like missing a bus or forgetting an assignment from years ago. Brain scans during REM sleep show heavy activity in the amygdala, a part of the brain closely tied to emotion, especially fear and stress, even while the logical, decision-making parts of your brain go relatively quiet. Some researchers think dreaming might work like an overnight therapy session your brain gives itself without asking permission. It replays emotional moments from your day, but with your stress chemicals turned down, letting your brain process heavy feelings in a safer, lower-pressure state than when you first felt them, almost like reviewing a stressful memory with the volume turned way down. That would explain something a lot of people notice without realizing why. A problem that felt impossible to deal with the night before sometimes feels smaller or clearer the next morning. Your brain spent the night quietly working through the emotional weight of it, one replay at a time, stripping away some of the panic while keeping the information. Which means every time you dream, several systems might be running at the same time. Memory sorting, threat rehearsal, emotional processing, none of them cancels the others out. They stack, layer on top of layer, every single night, whether you remember any of it or not. And that stacking might explain one of the strangest facts about dreaming. Almost every complex animal sleeps and shows signs of something like REM activity. Dogs twitch and whimper. Cats' paws move like they're chasing something. But human dreams, the kind with full storylines and characters and plot and dialogue, seem to be something else entirely, layered on top of all of that. Some researchers think this points to a fourth piece: creativity and problem solving. Because dreams pull together memories, emotions, and random associations that would never normally connect while you're thinking logically, they can end up producing genuinely new ideas. There are well-documented cases of scientists, writers, and musicians who have said their biggest breakthroughs came directly out of a dream, because the sleeping brain doesn't follow the same rules the waking brain does. It's allowed to combine things that don't obviously belong together, skip logical steps, and connect ideas your waking mind would immediately reject as irrelevant. And sometimes that combination is the exact thing a person needed. There's one more wrinkle worth mentioning, because it doesn't fit neatly into any of the theories above: lucid dreams. Every once in a while, some people become aware, mid-dream, that they're dreaming. And in rare cases, they can even start steering it, choosing where to go or what to do next, all while still fully asleep. Researchers studying this have found measurable brain activity that looks like a hybrid state. Not quite the deep unconscious pattern of a normal dream, and not quite the fully alert pattern of being awake, but something in between. Nobody fully agrees on what lucid dreaming means for any of the theories above, but its existence is a reminder that whatever dreaming actually is, it's flexible enough to sometimes let a sliver of waking awareness leak in through the cracks. Which brings back the original question, but from a different angle. How does one nightly process manage to juggle this many different jobs at once? Here's a possible answer. Dreaming isn't one single thing with one single purpose. It's what happens when several separate useful brain processes, memory sorting, threat rehearsal, emotional processing, creative recombination, all happen to run during the same unconscious window, overlapping and interacting. And your mind experiences the overlap as a story, because that's the only format your conscious awareness knows how to use. That would also explain why dreams often feel like a strange mashup, your childhood home, but with a coworker in it, having a conversation that makes no logical sense but somehow felt urgent at the time. Multiple systems are overlapping, pulling from different parts of your memory and emotional processing at once, and your mind is doing its best to stitch the results into something that feels like a coherent scene, even when the pieces don't actually belong together. If that's the case, the strangeness of dreams stops looking like malfunction. You're catching a glimpse of several different jobs happening at once, disguised as one experience, packaged into something your waking brain can sort of follow along with. You spend roughly a third of your life asleep. A big chunk of that time, your brain is quietly sorting memories, rehearsing danger, softening emotional weight, and occasionally stumbling into ideas you'd never think of while awake, and then wiping most of the evidence before you're conscious enough to remember it happened. It feels like nothing. It feels like it barely matters, because you forget almost all of it within minutes of waking up, and what little you do remember rarely makes logical sense anyway. But underneath that forgettable, half-remembered nonsense is a system that's been quietly running maintenance on your mind every single night of your life, doing work you were never meant to witness directly, let alone understand while it's happening. The dream you can't quite remember this morning mattered more than it felt like. Your brain used it, ran what it needed, and quietly let it go before you ever woke up. One more night of invisible work, filed away before you even opened your eyes, ready to do the exact same thing again tomorrow night, whether you notice it or not.